Hello, I'm Brian Bailey, editor for Semiconductor Engineering. I'm here today with Michel Courtoy, who has recently become the VP at Kilopass. But we're here today to talk about startups, and Michel has a lot of extensive experience with startups. He's worked for many. He sits on the board of many startup companies, so he's well qualified to talk about what it actually takes to get a startup going and maintain it, and how you look at things like exit strategies. Michel, what kind of advice would you have for an EDA startup company?
So the first advice I would have, which is I think critical, is it's going to take you a very long time. You're going to have to be very patient. I think if we look at what's been happening with EDA startup most recently, is that it's taking companies 10 to 15 years to reach a critical mass, to get sold to a bigger, maybe one of the big three companies, or to reach a level where they can think about acquiring other companies. So that you got to start with that mentality that you're running a marathon, that it's going to be 10, 15 years.
So are there things that they can do up front that improve their chances?
Well, obviously, if you have a well-targeted, well-thought-out segment that you're attacking, it's going to be very helpful. But at the same time, given that things change very quickly, you also know that your company is going to have to adapt. It's going to have to use the fashionable word today, it's going to have to pivot. So you can do those things, but it's still somewhat of a gamble.
So it appears that there's a lot of problems getting VC funding for companies. How are people managing to get the funding to start up today?
Well, clearly in EDA, it is a difficult value proposition to get funded. I think if you were to go to the traditional VCs in California on Sand Hill Road or other similar location, if you talk about EDA or even semiconductor, you're not going to get any interest. So you need to find other avenues to fund your company. Probably at the start, it means bootstrapping the company and maybe taking on money from a few select angels. That would be the first phase of your company. Then maybe once you have an initial product, you can look at customers or other strategic partners for topping up your funding, maybe do a Series A funding. We've seen Samsung, Intel, sometimes Qualcomm fund some of those companies. So that would be other opportunities. Also, I've worked a lot with startups that have started looking at funding from SBIR, Small Business Administration, or NSF. I think those types of funding have been traditionally overlooked in Silicon Valley, but they can be very valuable because there's, first of all, a lot of money, but also the money is non-dilutive. Those people don't take shares of your company like the VCs would, so it protects your ownership in the company. And finally, I've also worked a lot with startups from Europe, from Canada, etc. And those countries are doing a very good job at providing money through tax incentive or other incentives for startup to get off the ground. So I usually encourage those companies that are based abroad to initially start looking for their money in their location regionally, rather than come to the bigger, maybe better known VCs from Silicon Valley, but that are not interested in EDA.
Now, most startups are going to come from somebody having sort of a technology idea. At what point do they really need to start bringing in sort of management experience and think about handing off the reins to somebody else to be the CEO?
Yeah, it used to be that when you brought in VC money, the VC would force that transition, right? I was actually I guess, the beneficiary of such a situation where a VC decided to invest a few million in a company and decided to bring me in as the CEO. So I thought it was great. I think in the absence of the VCs or other people bringing in significant amount of money and taking maybe a majority ownership in the company, it becomes very much driven by the existing management of the company, wherein the CEO feels that he's overloaded, he's not able to handle the situation. Maybe he's bright enough to consult with mentors, seeks advice, and the recommendation is to go look for external management. What is the right time? It's going to depend very much on the company, but it's probably going to be at a point where that technical founding team doesn't feel like they can perform anymore.
Moving right up to the other end, the exit strategy. It used to be that we were only looking really at the big three as the only out that people had. Today it seems as though the IP companies are perhaps another potential place that they could go to, and we're hearing a lot more today about the large semiconductor companies themselves taking in or taking back part of their CAD and EDA frameworks. Are these going to be new potential places that they can look to sell out to?
Yes, I agree. I actually worked for 4 years in the M&A group of Cadence at a time when Cadence acquired many companies. So I have that perspective of being the acquirer, and I also sold my company and was on the board and helped sell a couple of other startups. So I have a pretty broad perspective on that. And I think what's changed is, first of all, the big trees are buying a little bit less, but they're also targeting their purchases to companies that are more mature. So companies that are producing already $20 million in revenue, so they are purchases that affect their top line. So if you look at Cadence's latest acquisitions, they've been, for example, Jasper, which was running close to $30 million a year, or Tensilica, which was in that range as well. So they're buying less of the smaller companies. Then you also used to have mid-sized EDA companies that would purchase small startups, like Springsoft purchased my company, Certes, Eve purchased Taras, which was an accelerator, etc., right? So you had that middle ground of companies that purchase. That middle ground of EDA companies is gone, except for maybe Atrenta. So that's another avenue that's lost for startups. So what I've seen is what you just explained. I sold a company recently, EDA company, to Intel. It hasn't been advertised because it was a small purchase, especially at the scale of Intel, but it was a great exit for the founders of the company. So those things are happening today. We talked earlier today about ARM starting to poke their toe a little bit into the acquisitions of EDA companies. They've done it to Obsidian a few years ago, Duolog more recently. So I think those are people or companies that you have to go talk to if you're trying to sell an EDA company today.
Right, and your point about the EDA companies wanting higher revenue, that takes us all the way back to where we started. That's going to take the EDA company a lot longer and a lot more money to actually get to that kind of revenue level. So it seems like it's almost a vicious circle.
Absolutely, and that's a marathon I was talking about, right? To get to that 15, 20, $30 million revenue level, it is taking 15 years. I mean, I looked at the numbers for Jasper recently, and it was almost on the clock 15 years. So yes, maybe there's no way around it. But then again, the companies that I talked about, the acquisitions, and the interest that I see from some of the larger semiconductor companies in terms of acquiring EDA solutions, they're usually looking more at a solution, a specific solution to a problem, an existing problem in their design flow. So they don't care about your revenue level. So they might be willing to acquire you if you're still small, if you do $1, $2, million of revenue, but you have a solution that can help them today.
Thank you, Michel.
Thank you, Brian.